Hi there, welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to talk about true crime stories involving writers. The case that we'll explore today is that of Pauline Parker and Juliet Hulme, who were two teenage girls living in New Zealand in the early 1950s. Please help us! Mommy is hurt, covered in blood! These were the screams that were heard from Kenneth and Agnes Ritchie at the Victoria Park's tea kiosk. They had recognized the two teenage girls as they had eaten at the tea rooms earlier. They ran after the girls to a walking path where they discovered the body of Honora Reaper. The story that the girls had given the couple was that she had fallen and hit her head, but upon closer inspection, Mr. Ritchie didn't really believe that this was the case, and so at approximately 3:30 p.m. on June 22nd, 1954, the police were called. As the police combed through Victoria Park that evening, Pauline Reaper and Juliet Hulme had taken a bath at the Hulme residence on Island Road. As they combed through the park, they discovered half a brick in a bloodied stocking that was thrown under some nearby trees. And given the extreme nature of the injuries to Honora, the police went by the home and insisted on speaking to the girls. When the police arrived, they already were in bed though, but the police were not going to leave empty-handed. And so they decided to get the statements from the girls. Now, it was said that Pauline was very quiet. She didn't really say much. However, Juliet was talking a whole lot, and apparently a whole lot of nothing, because she was talking about everything under the sun but about the quote-unquote accident. Now, Juliet was said to be the first to change her story, claiming that Pauline and Mrs. Reaper had a fight, but she hadn't been there at that time. She believed that Mrs. Reaper had fallen and gotten hurt, just like she said. Pauline also backed up her story, saying that Juliet hadn't witnessed the fight. Pauline then was subsequently taken away for police investigation, for police interrogation, and this was the last time that the girls were ever alone together again. The next morning, however, the police had found Pauline's diary, and upon reading it, it was clear to them that Juliet was very much a part of the murder, and she too was arrested. This news had the city of Christchurch reeling. 16-year-old Pauline Parker and her best friend Juliet Hulme, who was 15 at the time, would later become two of New Zealand's most notorious murderers for the killing of Pauline's mother, who was 45 years old at that time. So let's dig a little bit in their background, shall we? It has been reported that the girls met at the Christchurch High School after Juliet immigrated to New Zealand with her family in 1948 from London. And the girls became fast friends within that time, and it was said that they became fiercely codependent and had what most considered to be an obsessive relationship. Pauline and Juliet shared quite significant amount of time together. They would write stories and act out plays. It was also said that both girls were very intelligent, and they also bonded together over their health problems. Pauline had suffered from osteomyelitis. I hope I said that right. That is a painful bone infection that she had as a child. And also Juliet had a history of tuberculosis. And it was said that she was sent away from the UK various times to places like the Bahamas or South Africa in order to recuperate, in the warmer weather. So this was something that brought them closer as well. Now, Pauline's family came from a working class background, while Juliet's what we would consider middle class in most locations. Her dad was Dr. Henry Hulme, and he was a physicist who later became the rector of the Canterbury College. No information was found about her mom, Hilda Hulme, as far as a professional history. There were very varying information about Pauline's parents' employment history. One source was reporting that they were part-time house staffs and gardeners employed at the University of Canterbury, while another was mentioned that her mom ran a boarding house and that her dad worked at a fish shop. So I'm not sure which of these are accurate. One thing that was mentioned also was that, her parents gave the appearance of a married couple, but it was revealed later during the trial that Pauline's parents were Herbert and Honora were not actually married. Now, when Juliet's parents revealed to the girls that they were getting divorced and that the plan was for Juliet and her little brother to move with her father to South Africa, both Pauline and Juliet were desperate to stay together. And this is something that they were totally against. Entries in Pauline's diary showed that she hatched a plan for the murder around the time that this was disclosed to them, and that she had refused, because her mom had refused to let her go to South Africa with Juliet. And according to Pauline, her mom was one of the main obstacles in my path, according to what was written in her diary. So it seemed that this news that was revealed to them was one of the triggers that led to them acting in hopes that they would be able to stay together. Brought lots of spectators, both locally and from foreign news media, who would gather around the courthouse as early as 8 a.m. in hoping to get seats to see Juliet and Pauline as they arrived. What was reported was that the girls were enjoying the attention. They would pose and wave to the photographers from the window of their holding cells until the court official had to eventually cover the windows. The murder was dubbed the Parker Hulme murders, and was a well-known part of the Christchurch history until today, really, due to the violent nature of the crime, the age of the girls, as well as the fact that it is a matricide, which is considered to be fairly rare. Now, as mentioned before, the witnesses, the couple who they had ran to initially for help, Agnes and Kenneth Ritchie, were one of the witnesses in the trial. There was also Eric McElroy. There was the ambulance driver, Harold Keyes. There was a Dr. Walker, Sergeant Hope, Constable Donald Molyneux, and Griffiths, Herbert Reaper, also testified into the events of June 22nd. And then it was also listed a pathologist, Dr. Colin Pearson, who testified to the extent of Honora's injuries. Also, Juliet's mom, Hilda Hulme, also took the stand. It was reported that she was the last person to take the stand following rumors of her affair and her husband's abrupt departure from the country. So spectators were really waiting to hear her testimony just because of all the gossip that was going on surrounding her personal life. But she did testify that Juliet's childhood was difficult due to her illness, separation from her family, and she mentioned how she was a difficult child. She also made a statement that Juliet was definitely resentful of her brother. And Juliet, it was said, who had been previously calm, and, throughout the trial, her and Pauline would be giggling and whispering together. When her mom had mentioned that, she began to stand up and look as though she wanted to say something, but she kind of gathered herself together and sat back down without saying anything. Now, during the course of the trial, it was pretty much irrefutable that the girls had killed Honora, that they were the accused and the people who had committed the crime. The defense tried to argue heavily for an insanity plea. However, two of the expert witnesses argued unsuccessfully for that Pauline and Juliet were suffering from paranoid insanity, citing that their extreme narcissism, delusions of grandeur were among the things that led to that. Their haughty and remorseless behavior during the trial did not help either. But ultimately, it was ruled that they were not insane and they were clearly and capable of going through with the trial. They also during the trial, they also turned to Pauline's diary, which showed proof of her personality and her narcissism, but also the fact that the girls knew exactly what they were doing and that what they were doing was wrong. What they intended to pursue was against the law. Now, the day that things went down was classified in Pauline's diary as the happy event. This is how she described it in her diary, as an outing to Victoria Park, where Pauline and Juliet would commit the crime. The girls struck Honora approximately, well, it says over 20 times, and that she had more than 45 injuries to her head and face. So it was pretty brutal, especially to be up close and to sit there for so many blows to be delivered. That has to be a lot of intent from start to finish. Now, between Pauline's entry on April 29th, it was in which she said, "The last fate that I wish to meet is one in Borstal. I am trying to think of some way. I do not want to go to too much trouble, but I want to appear either a natural or an accidental death." And Juliet's statement said, "You have to be an absolute moron to not know that murder is against the law." So there was no doubt that they were not legally insane. So the Crown prosecutor summed up the widely held opinion that the girls were not insane. So I wonder, if they had, if they knowingly had done something wrong, or if, according to the diary, was there something that would have explained their behavior during the trial? Because they knew it was wrong, and coming to trial, the way they were behaving with the whispering and giggling during the trial, that just seems really off to me about why they would behave this way, knowing that they had done something so horribly wrong, and knowing ahead of time what the consequence would be. So there was a little bit of, I wanted to look into what matricide was, as it was mentioned in one of the articles. And matricide is considered to be the killing of one's mother. And as I mentioned earlier, it's something that's very, very rare. It's like less than 1% of the parental deaths that occur overall. And it said that parricide, which is killing of a parent, it's usually most of the time driven by some kind of mental illness, and in other cases driven by like assault, maybe ill treatment by the parents, or maybe treatment that had occurred by a third party who may have violated the kids, but the parent didn't do anything. So this seems to be outside of what's normal for a parricide or matricide, because the parent, as far as what was revealed in court or any other information that I could find, there was no evidence of any abuse. They just weren't going to be able to have their way this time. So I just wonder if there was more to their mental health, though, considering their actions and how they would behave later. Anyway, the trial went on for 6 days. It was a spectacle locally. It was making front pages, both in Christchurch and abroad as well. Ultimately, the girls were convicted of the murder and they were sent to separate prisons. It was normal for 25 years to be the term, but it turned out that they only served 5.5 years in prison. So after 5.5 years, in November of 1959, they were released to start new lives with new identities. It was believed that as a part of their release that they were never to communicate with each other again. However, some sources mentioned that this was not true. So what does all of this have to do with Anne Perry? As it turns out, Juliet Hulme became Anne Perry, the last name being that of her stepdad, Walter Perry. After her release in 1959, she returned to England to live with her mom and her stepdad. It was said that she took on a variety of jobs, and one of which was as a domestic flight attendant in the early 60s. In 1967, Anne was granted visa to live and work in the U.S., and as a part of the immigration process, she made a complete admission of her past, and the immigration authorities also reviewed the transcript of her trial before granting her her visa. Around the time that she was 29 and living in San Francisco, Anne was introduced to the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints by an acquaintance and subsequently became a Mormon. It was said that she made a complete disclosure to the church of her identity and of her past, and she was welcomed warmly by the church. And it was said that Anne had written on the history of the Mormon church in the UK as well. Anne later moved to Los Angeles, where she worked a number of jobs while doing her writing. One job she had was as an underwriter. However, while she was writing, she didn't really have a whole lot of success. And ultimately, she moved back to the UK in the 1970s. After she moved back to the UK, she continued her writing as well, although without any commercial success. One book, however, that was finally published with some success, and her first commercial success, was The Cater Street Hangman. It was accepted for publication and was published in 1979. Prior to this, she had never managed to sell any of her historical fiction work. And by moving into the Victorian era and the genre of murder mysteries, she was finally seeing some commercial success. Since she had a taste of success, she began to write furiously and fervently and built up a reputation and her readership. She went on to write over 100 books as well and had a writing career that spanned over 40 years. Many of her books were part of major series, while several were standalone novels, short stories, anthology, and non-fiction books. It was said that Anne lived on the coast of Scotland for years and years, approximately 30 years after her release, and she eventually moved back to Los Angeles in 2017, and it was said that the reason for this was to be close to the film and television industry. According to her official website, she ended up selling 26 million copies of her books worldwide and has enormous critical and popular acclaim. She is known for her memorable characters, her historical accuracy, and exploration of social and ethical issues, and also won the Edgar Award in 2000 for her short story Heroes. She also wrote introductions for Conan Doyle, The Hound of Bakersville, Wilkie Collins' Woman in White, Baron Ozzie, Scarlet Pimpernel for the New Modern Library, and has edited and contributed to numerous anthologies. She was also selected by the Times as one of the 20th century's 100 Masters of Crime. Now, Anne had lived for years and years as Anne Perry without incident, and as I mentioned, with her history and her literary career, she had been writing for a long, long time. And ultimately, though, in 1994, an investigative journalist named Lynn Ferguson revealed that Anne Perry was indeed Juliet Hulme. It was around the time that Heavenly Creatures were playing in the film festivals, and The Heavenly Creatures was based on the Parker Hulme trial and events surrounding that. Now, the filmmakers were aware of rumors that were surrounding the Juliet Hulme identity and whereabouts, and had done extensive research and had actually put some clues in the movie as to Juliet's identity. They were careful, though, however, not to include any rumors or explicit statements that would identify her or Pauline Parker. It was said that apparently, after overhearing a comment made by a New Zealand friend of Anne Perry, that Ferguson took up Juliet's trail with a Mr. Walter Perry, who was listed as an engineer lodger in Heavenly Creatures, and acknowledged that the girls had a burning desire to become published authors. This is crazy how he found her, because he just went online to search for contemporary authors, and then he got lucky and found that one of the authors had listed his dad as Walter Perry. And then he found out that that writer also had a date of birth that matched Juliet Hulme. So he started making phone calls and ultimately reached her literary agent in London, which led to Anne having to admit that she was indeed Juliet Hulme. So, to her credit, she quickly admitted her identity, after this person reached out to her literary agent. In a 2003 article by The Guardian regarding the crime, she had mentioned, quote, I felt I had a debt to repay. Pauline was the only one who had written to me when I was in the hospital, and she had threatened to kill herself if I didn't help. She was vomiting after every meal and losing weight all the time. I am sure now she was bulimic. I really believed that she would take her life, and I couldn't face it, unquote. So Hume had spent 5 years, as I mentioned, previous five and a half, five and a half. Some sources are mentioning a small variance there, and she had mentioned that it was a tough time for her in prison, but she had learned from from her time in prison. She felt like it was the best thing that happened to her. It was there that I went down on my knees and repented, she said. That is how I survived my time while others cracked up. I seem to be the only one saying I am guilty and I am where I should be. So she took full accountability for what she had done. She ultimately felt remorse for that and vowed to be different, once she was released. This is what I'm taking from that anyway, not what she said. Now, with regard to the revelation of her true identity, she said, quote, it seems so unfair. Everything that I had worked to achieve as a decent member of society was threatened. And once again, my life is being interrupted by someone else. It had happened in court when I was a minor. I wasn't allowed to speak, and I heard all those lies being told. And now there's a film, but nobody had bothered to talk to me. I know nothing about it until the day it was released. All I could think of was that my life would fall apart and it might kill my mother, unquote. So based on that, it seems like she was never consulted about the story for that film that was made surrounding her life. In the 2009 documentary surrounding her called Interiors, Anne spoke about her past as well. She said, quote, in a sense, it's not a matter at the end of judging, she said. I did this much good and that much bad. Which is greater? It's in the end, who am I? Am I somebody that can be trusted? Am I someone that is compassionate, gentle, patient, strong? She mentioned other traits: bravery, honesty, caring. If you're that kind of person, if you've done something bad in the past, you've obviously changed. She concluded, it's who you are when time's up that matters. End of quote. There is a lot to be said for the capacity of a person to change. And it seemed that she really had repented and truly meant it when she did while she was serving her time. Anne passed away on April 10th, 2023, at the age of 84. It was said that her death was at a hospital, and it was confirmed by her literary agent, and it was said that she had a little decline in her health over the past few years since she had had a heart attack. She is survived by her brother, Jonathan. If you are hearing this, you've made it to the end of the video, and I appreciate you so much for hanging around and listening to my true crime story related to Anne Perry. And I realized after I completed everything that I referred to Lynn Ferguson as a he. I realized that that's a she. I don't know why I thought it was a he in my head. In my head, I just see Lynn and I'm thinking it's a he. Also, I don't know. I'm just bumbling and stumbling through this one. I was so tongue tied. I don't know what happened today. So I appreciate you hanging in there with me. And thanks for listening. And I appreciate it. If you did enjoy this true crime recap, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you do have ideas for others I could cover, I would appreciate you dropping them in the comments as well. Until next time.